Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great night tonight and that you've managed to stay somewhat cool and you're inside enjoying this during this heat wave that we're having. My name is Amy Bradley Hull, and I am very pleased to welcome you to tonight's Six Bridges Book Festival event. We are here with author Sloane Crosley. So excited to get to talk with her. Sloane, tell everybody hello.
Hi.
So yes, so happy to have her here. I do want to say one little housekeeping item before we get started though. I'll be monitoring both sections, doing my best to kind of catch all the questions going through there. So please make sure you join in with us, ask questions, get in on the discussion because it's sure to be a fun one tonight. So like I said, I'm so excited to welcome Sloane Crosley this evening. I actually first met Sloane back in 2016 at back then what was called the Arkansas Literary Festival, so at a Lit Fest event. She came here to Little Rock, and we were so excited to have her. She was then talking about her new novel, The Clasp, that had just come out, but now she's here with us this evening to talk about her newest work, cult classic. Hold it up here for everybody to see. It's my well-worn copy now. I got it back in gosh, I guess back in March or something like that. And I read through it the first time so quickly. I've actually kind of gone through it again the second time because it was such a fun read. But I'll give you a quick little introduction of Sloane. Besides this and her other novel, she is a prolific writer. She has been she's written for so many different publications. Let's see, New York Times. She's was a columnist for them. She was written for Vanity Fair, New York Observer. She also, though, has written a couple of just hilarious collections of essays. The first one was I Was Told There'd Be Cake. And the second one that well, not her second one, but one that I love so much, and I especially love the title, is How Did You Get This Number? Both of those, she was a finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor with both of those. So if you like good humorous essays, Sloane's your gal there. So yeah, cult classic. I'm gonna let her read from it here in just a moment for us, and I'm also going to kind of let her. So, are you ready to read? Do you want to read?
No, I didn't know. I can grab a book.
Oh, you don't have to. You don't have to. You know what to.
No, there's a couple. Hold on. One sec. Please enjoy my refrigerator and all the magnets for just 2 seconds. 2 seconds.
Well, so while she's gone, I'm going to kind of set it up just a little bit about what this novel is about. So perfect. I was just telling her I was going to give a little brief setup for it, but I'm going to let you do a better job. So our protagonist in this novel, her name is Lola, living in New York City, late 30s. She's engaged to be married. And then one night she just kind of bumps into one of her exes, an old boyfriend. And then the next day she happens to bump into another ex-boyfriend. And what we soon learn is that it might not be a coincidence that right here, as she's about to get married, she's starting to bump into some of the past loves in her life. So I'll leave it at that. I definitely don't want to give you any spoilers. But Sloane, if you would like to, again, if you want to do any other introduction, let us know about the book or just hop right into reading, please go ahead. The floor
I'll hop right in, but before I hop right in, I have to say thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I need to rent your accent when I say spoilers. It sounds so flat and uncharming when I say it. I'm like, spoilers. It goes to like this beautiful melodic thing. So thank you guys for having me. I wish I was there in person. Huge Little Rock fan. Definitely befriended a couple of cats, sat on some porches, drank some alcohol last time I was there. So I'm going to do something actually, since I don't want to take up too much time reading. We're thinking about 5 minutes, probably less. I'm going to do something a little unorthodox and read from the middle of the book. This is why Zoom is so good. You can just see this right in the middle, which is not really something you're supposed to do because usually it requires a lot of introduction, but I think this will be kind of fun And it's sort of intentionally this monologue in the middle of the book. And so all you need to know really, I think, is that our heroine Lola is about to Google everyone she has ever dated and ever at all. And so this is just sort of a list. All right. There were men whose dating profiles had read like rules at a public pool. No tattoos, no couch potatoes, no heavy drinkers, no picky eaters, no taking oneself too seriously, no drama. Men who demanded a woman have a sense of humor but showed no signs of being funny. Men who posted photos alongside striking female acquaintances, as if to say, just so you have a sense. Men whose insecurities ran so deep they came out as accusations. How do you not have a boyfriend? What's wrong with you? I went out with them anyway, these bouquets of red flags, curious as to how repulsively I'd have to behave in order to trigger a new decree, knowing in advance the answer would be not very. So many bloodless creatures who wanted all my blood, who offered nothing of themselves in return, who accused me of not opening up during the once every 2 weeks I was permitted to see them. The needle of curiosity goes in, the traits are sent off to the lab, and the results are never to be shared. There were men who told me they wouldn't sleep with their ex-girlfriends for all the tea in China, but who turned out to own an import-export business in Beijing. Men who broke up with me because I was too good for them. But when do we send our food back to the kitchen because it's too delicious? These were the same men who were always off to the gym, to the studio. The party was lame. The party was boring. You wouldn't have had any fun. Men who didn't think they were misogynists because they defended the actions of famous women, or famous minority women, or famous trans women. Men who said that I reminded them of the girl who broke their heart in college, or the one who cheated on them in grad school. Tuesday afternoon kind of wounds for every woman I knew in New York. Men who told me they would have to be dragged, kicking and screaming out of this town, but now lived in Idaho. Another woman had dragged them. But how? A blow to the head? Ether and a hand towel? Did she take the back roads? These were the same men who'd said they'd gone celibate for fear of hurting women, who thought they'd invented sadness, who told me I had no clue how dark things got in their heads, how dank the basements of their sorrow. Unrequited narcissists, these were men with a delicate sense of injustice when it came to their fellow man. Yes, life's a witch hunt. It will magnify your sins until they are grotesque, canceling you from a program you didn't even know you were on. Is that a broomstick between your thighs, or are you happy to see me? We'll stop with that a little bit.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I feel like I could pluck it out a little, out of context. It was just sort of fun to write. So hopefully it would be fun to read and listen to.
Yeah, no, that was a great read. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, and that one, I was sitting there when I was listening to that, I was like, you kind of, in that little snippet, it's like you get so much of a view into Lola's mindset and her philosophies around love and dating and New York and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that was a great passage, actually.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So it's hard for me to, a lot of times when I'll introduce a novel, I'll say, this is a great rom-com or a great mystery thriller, that kind of thing. So this book is a rom-com. It's sci-fi. It's a psychological thriller. And, it's very much a classic novel in a lot of ways. Like kind of I don't know, does that sound kind of weird? It's like classic literature in a way too.
Yeah. Sure.
So it's a little bit of everything. How? Why? Was it just a snippet of a story that kind of came to your mind and you went with it from there? Or did you have in mind that you wanted to create a work that was a little bit of everything?
I really want to answer because it's more bang for your buck, books are expensive and I one of everything. No, I think that when I think of it really primarily as speculative fiction, right? So it's basically you're sort of plodding along. Plodding is a bad word. It's not very selling for the book, but you have this sort of comedy of manners and sort of traditional literary fiction novel, and then something a little bit mystical or a little bit magical happens to sort of pop these people out of their lives. And in that way, it has a little bit of a DNA kind of overlap with my first novel, The Class. But
Mhm.
in that one, it's sort of this outsized thing that happens where one of the characters, it's about three friends, and one of the characters decides to go on this hunt for this like Indiana Jones like hunt for a necklace he's absolutely convinced
Mhm.
exists in the north of France. Um, because I didn't want it to be a bunch of sort of 20-year-olds sitting around in a bar in Brooklyn bantering and talking about their lives, even though I know that's actually my strong suit. I feel like I can write that and I can write it funny and I feel okay
Yeah.
saying that. And for this one, it's even more important. It's first person, so it's a closer, probably sort of authoritative voice that mimics probably my essays. Um, Even though it's fiction. And then I wanted it to be really romance, so that instead of like just stewing in a pot of your own issue filth, I just wanted to give her a way out, because so much of the book is about her attachment to the past and what is closure, and should she go through with this marriage, and what's healthy. And so I just wanted to really have a sort of interesting way in to, it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but an interesting way into the topics you're talking about. This,
Yeah.
it's really hard to write about dating and romance, and I hate to say it, but New York, because these subjects are so well trodden, you
Mhm.
know? It's like writing about the Civil War. Like, if you are going to write about the Civil War, you better have a new angle, because guess
Yeah.
what? Everyone's hit it.
It's been done. Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone's hit it. So I think it's a weird analogy, but I think that love and human, sort of dating is like that. And so I feel like once I found this way through this like cult, sort of new age cult, that's the machinery behind it,
Mhm.
I was like, and so that's why you see all these different elements. It's really all a way of me figuring out how to get to write about romance without staring at it directly.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings up another question for me when you were talking about this is what I could write so very well. And you have done that in your essays. Um, and of course, your essays are much more personal. This is a work of fiction, but how much of yourself is in this book? How
Right.
much of you is in Lola? Um, you know, I kept wondering that when I was reading it and thinking it's so very, the conversations are so very realistic. I mean, the conversations on the one hand, they're very comedic, with her and her friend, with their ex-boss and um, but they're very relatable. I felt the whole time I was reading it that I'm like, wait a minute, I know
Right.
I've had some of these conversations with my girlfriends or with an ex-boyfriend at a bar, that kind of thing. So something about it did feel very personal to me. So again, how much of yourself is in this book, even though it is a work of fiction?
Well, two parts. One is you want it to feel relatable, but it is funny that there's a great uh, a problem if you do what I consider, not to be totally obnoxious about it, but like too good of a job. If you do too good of a job on the relatable front, this isn't to say that the novel is, brilliant and successful in every way, but if you do feel this recognition in it, that recognition of exasperation or the kind of life that you're living as well, there can be a conflation in how it's received. I remember when Bridget Jones,
Mm.
when Helen Fielding, actually, I'm doing it right now. When Helen Fielding was Bridget Jones, her friend made her a T-shirt that said, "I am not Bridget Jones." And I don't know if this is, the kind of success this would have to reach this novel to necessitate a T-shirt. It was huge.
Not Lola.
Huge. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, she doesn't have a last name, but that actually kind of dovetails with the answer in a way, where she's sort of this every woman character. Most people get a last name in the book, she doesn't. And I think it's because I wanted her to be in a way, all of the women I have, befriended and I know who I'm close with in New York and what I've witnessed. Like you asked how much of me is in the book. I've done very minimal. I think I personally have gone on like 3, maybe 2 online dates in my life.
Really cool.
Obviously from that passage I just read, she's like very fluent in all the profiles. So you know what I mean? And she's very fluent. And so for me, I feel like I took, in a way, all my worst impulses, all the worst impulses I've seen of other people, both men and women. And I just took the dial and I went like this.
Turn it up.
So she is, in some ways, I am horrified by her, in some ways, her indecision, her sort of weird, warped memory of the past and what happened, her lack of responsibility that she takes for it. I don't necessarily find great qualities.
Yeah.
And I think she's a fundamentally lazy person who thinks that she's actually actively trying to fix things.
Yeah.
She's more letting them fall into her lap. And so I don't think that these are qualities I have, or at least not as, like not as a grown up. But there's also something in her where like, she's witty, she's trying, she has this like genuine affection for her friends, genuine curiosity. And as much as, like that passage I just read, if I had kept reading, in the end, she has this moment after this monologue in which she lambasts every kind of man in New York of like real affection for them, and there's a line where she says, how could I not love them all just a little bit? The fact that we met, that we were here at the same time. And so there's a lot of her I really like, but sort of, I guess the person she is when she goes to bed at night, I hope cues close to me, and how she behaves, I hope is nothing like me. Because it has to be. I mean, at a certain point, it's disingenuous when authors, you write a book that's first person narrative nonfiction to just say, oh, it's not me, it's not me. Like it's a little me, but it's also something you sort of manufacture. The second you give people a fake name, both the men that run through this book, the friends, her former boss, even the restaurants, even the setting, there are places on the Lower East Side where this is set where I definitely had a kind of a place in mind. And all of a sudden you start writing it, and to use like a sort of psychological term, it becomes like the gestalt of the place. Where I'm like, this is the kind of restaurant it is. Like, but it started as a specific place and it just morphs really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I like one of our commenters, Angel, hashtag I am Lola.
Oh yeah. I would take a t-shirt that said that.
I get it, Angel. I get it though. But yeah, because like I said, she was very relatable. And I like that you mentioned that she's not flawless. She's not perfect.
No, especially when you live with someone for, as a writer, you live with someone for 300 pages, even if she started out as being anything that resembled my doppelganger, which she really didn't, but let's say she did. After 300 pages,
you're going to be tired of that.
So, oh my gosh, like Charlie Brown's mom,
Yeah.
I'm not really selling the book. It's funny.
She's horrible. She didn't know.
Yeah.
I know what I was going to say about that. One of the things that I liked that you did is, okay, so I'll kind of set this up. I felt that there were a lot of similarities in the book to, maybe some other things that I'd read, some movies, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
Palm Springs. I don't know if you've seen that.
I did see it. I saw it on a plane.
Okay. So kind of reminded me of that. Groundhog's Day, just kind of a feel for that. However, I would say that in most of those movies, when I was thinking about it, and it kind of, in general, it's like it's the man who has to come to a big reckoning and change his ways and shape up and all of that kind of stuff. And I like that with this book, you turned that around and said, no, it's not just men aren't the only ones who have to do that. Us women can really suck at relationships too. We can be really crappy fiancés too. We can be really have cold feet and not know how to act sometimes. And so I liked how you kind of flipped that script a little bit. again, was that kind of intentional? Or was it just that
It just happened.
she was the main character kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the larger point of the book is, um, it's really hard to wrap up a book very neatly, or at least a novel very neatly. I don't particularly like it when it happens anyway.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a good thing that I don't like it and it's difficult to do. Great. Essays tend to have more of a sort of, you sort of have a landing to stick, or a plane to land a little bit. But there's a way that she is sort of taught a lesson. All those stories that you just mentioned, and it goes back to Dickens, Christmas Carol or It's a Wonderful Life, or for like the literary version, one of the couple of books I've been bringing up a lot, that I read after this, are Iris Murdoch, Muriel Spark, these kind of sort of interesting authors where different characters get woven in pretty late into the book. So you have this like container of the friendship and how these people know each other and that they're sort of manipulating each other.
Yeah.
And then into that container falls all these different
Yes.
experiences
Other
with
people
men.
kind of flowing in and out kind of
Flowing
thing.
in and out. And so to use another cinematic sort of reference, it would be almost if you've seen the Richard Linklater movies, like After Sunset or Before Sunrise, In the Moonlight. I'm forgetting the film. But anyway, so I guess it wasn't necessarily my goal when I started the book, but as I wrote it, I realized that um, this was really something that was happening where, at a certain point, Clive, her old boss, looks at her, who's sort of running this experiment on her and advises her to think of it as a Christmas carol. And she quips back, yeah, by way of The Exorcist. And I feel like in that moment, I definitely saw at least how some of the characters see the book, which is in that sort of traditional, sort of mystical or magical intervention. But it's very interesting. And what I didn't really notice until I wrote it is that all those movies are so beloved, beloved, beloved. And so are the books that I mentioned.
Mhm.
But what's weird about it is that the other characters are not in on it. So like Andy McDowell in Groundhog Day has no idea that this is happening,
Yeah.
right? And like no one else in It's a Wonderful Life has an idea that this is happening. And the same thing with the other wedding guests in Palm Springs. So that's fine for a movie. Once you start writing it in a book where you have these other sort of voices and the other hopefully strong characters, you almost enter into this like bizarre morality trap where none of these people are on the same playing field, and you notice the unfairness of a story like that for the first time. But anyway, long story short is that yes, I did want to do that. It did become intentional very quickly once I realized what kind of story it is, and that traditionally those stories are applied to men. But yeah, this time it's the woman who needs to be fixed and go through this emotional gauntlet.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm glad you mentioned, a lot of other books and movies and things like that were kind of similar, because I have to ask you if you've heard about the show that's actually premiering in tomorrow, actually. I just thought about it, it's tomorrow. So I was
I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Okay, I think so. I was in England back in April and I saw an advert for this coming across the TV and I was like, wait a minute. And I just finished the book and I was like, whoa, hold up. I just read this book. And it is
it's a reality show, right?
Yeah, it's a reality show for the audience and it's actually coming out. It's premiering in the US tomorrow. So for the audience, it's called The One That Got Away.
Yes.
And it is a reality dating show. But what happens in the show is they have this thing called the portal. And of course, like this big archway with the smoke and the lights effect and all that kind of stuff. And so the people who are on this dating show, all of a sudden through the portal, they each have someone who is one of their exes walk through the portal and appear back in their life. And they have the choice of, are they going to go with this new person or are they going to try to rekindle the flame with this random ex, and they don't know who it's going to be. They have no
Oh my
idea.
God.
Random ex who has walked through the portal. So that's the premise behind the show. New person or ex.
Amazing.
And the ex, like I said, complete surprise. They don't know who it's going to be. I love the trailer. I watched the trailer, and one of the girls in the trailer, she's like, I'm so sorry to have to ask you this, but can you tell me your name? She didn't even remember the ex's name.
But that's what's so weird, because they somehow track down these people.
Yes.
So I'd be interested to know, and this is in a way, it sort of dovetails with what's interesting me about the novel, or I'd be interested to know like the machinations, like how
do they
same way, like there's like a process by which these men are being dragged in a 5-block radius so that my heroine can run into them.
Yeah.
I want to know in real life,
how is that happening?
Does she not know who that is if he's there? So someone in her family or her friends had a conversation with the producers. So a friend of mine told me about this, texted me a few weeks ago. He's like, have you heard about the show? And I said no. But I'm very interested to watch it. I'd be willing to bet, but this is the whole question. It's like, how attached are you to the past? And I want to see, I'm sure that most of the viewership, I mean, without having seen the show, or like literally you're the second person to mention it, I know nothing about it, but I'd be willing to bet that like a viewership is probably rooting for you to move on, right? Like, don't go back. Don't go back. You have this new guy who's really nice. You just went on a date with him, or gal, or whatever it is. And you have this, and so move forward. But I bet that a lot of people choose the devil they know.
Yeah, as I say, because on the other hand, there's this thought, and again, Lola explores this, that, okay, who I was then wasn't great, who he was then wasn't great, but we're very different people now.
Yes.
How could we be great together? Since
there's definitely, she runs into like someone, the earliest ex is someone she, had an encounter with when she was 14 years old, right? And so she sees him on the street, which is sort of crazy that she even recognizes him, but she sees him, not really, because she's been like Google stalking all these guys, or, on Facebook or whatever for years. She sees him with like a wife and 2 kids. You know what I mean? So it's this also other thing where, or there's one of my favorite run-ins is she runs into this guy that she had a very sort of what would be, I guess, categorized as like an early aughts emo relationship. With lots of long emails and like links to songs and like overwrought analogies about boats, and she's like, can't imagine him like having a job, or can't imagine him paying. She says a comment at some point where she's like, she can't imagine him paying for goods and exchanging money for them instead of like a drawing of a fox. That like, and he's with this sort of very kind of high powered, like big personality, big job woman who runs like a folk art museum. And she's just sort of watching, like, how does their relationship work, and trying to figure out how much he's possibly changed, or what she gets out of dating, and it's sort of, it is fascinating, and it is fluid to see how people change and how they, I'm sure I'm better equipped to date people personally that I dated in my 20s if I met them now.
Yeah.
Or perhaps the other end is true. Maybe I'd be better equipped to not let it get past one date.
Yeah, say, you're not for me.
Not for me, right? You know yourself better. You can make these decisions a little bit faster, or you can just figure out where the brakes are, and where the pedal is. So where are you supposed to have? You can sort of know yourself better to know what is not a big deal and not a deal breaker, and fine. And what is actually not fine. And I should say, as I've said in actually a couple of interviews, when people start asking me, or you're not asking really, I'm just sort of delving into it of my own free will. But I'm not Esther Perel. I have no idea what people should be doing with their love lives. I just know how to fix this one fake woman.
But in doing so, who knows? In fixing Lola, maybe you will fix a whole lot.
I hope so.
Okay, we do have a question from the audience.
Well, great. I know, I'm
you.
noticing all these little
Yeah.
red dots.
So, David, thanks for popping us into the Q&A section. He says, standard nerdy process question. And David, I have to say, I also love the nerdy process
I was
question.
about to say, hit me.
Are you the sort of writer who handwrites whole chapters or essays? Or are you a total pantser when it comes to writing novels and other things? So, yeah.
So am I the sort of writer who can handwrite?
Yeah, like, I mean, do you like handwrite out and like go through, and David, correct me if I'm kind of getting your question wrong, but do you go through the whole thing all at once, or do you just kind of, fly by the seat of your pants, little snippets here and there?
Right. Okay, got it. I wasn't 100% fluent in pantser, but I'm stealing it, and now it's mine. So no, I basically what is the Paul Abdul, 2 steps forward, 1 step back? I don't know. Like I basically I write as much as I can out of a fear of lack of productivity, and then I go back a little bit as I do it. But it's easier for essays on account of the fact that they end all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas this only ends once. And so this, I feel like with the novel, you have to plot it out a little more. But I can't plot it. I think if you're writing one of those books that has a genealogical chart up top, where there's just, or it's the Ferrante or something like that, and you actually have
Leaping Saga kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, then you actually, or where it doesn't have to be so highbrow, if it's Game of Thrones or whatever. I'm sure that's plotted within an inch of its life, But for me, I find that zero plotting is a huge mistake, because I am a natural sort of essayist or comedian, and I will just make jokes and buy time. And then all of a sudden, nothing's happened. Things haven't moved forward. But if I plot it too carefully and too tightly, it sucks all the fun out of it. I don't want to know exactly where it's going. Like, this book has a pretty big twist at the end, and I did not know it when I started it. But I do remember
not in like I expected it to end. I will say, I was surprised.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a surprise. I hope nobody is not surprised by it. So I feel pretty good that I successfully, whether or not the ending is good, whether it's rushed, I don't know. But I will say, nobody sees it coming. That I know. And so I feel like I remember when I found that. I remember when I thought of it about like a quarter of a way through the book, and it was like the fountains at the Bellagio went off, So excited. So that would not happen if I plotted it too carefully. But so I don't handwrite anything. No, I have the handwriting of a psycho killer. So no.
Yeah, because that's what David, he followed up here for us. So David, thank you for correcting me. He said like handwrite in a notebook or something, like Susan Sontag used to write all of her stuff on legal pad.
Right. Yeah, well, Susan Sontag also let her hair go gray right here, and I dye it. So there's a lot of difference, which is like the primary difference between me and Susan Sontag, nothing else. But no, I know this question. I mean, I do take notes. I tend to write in a journal or diary or take notes or that kind of thing that he's talking about. Usually when I travel or when I'm somewhere where there's the days need to be broken up, where it's like a writing retreat or something like that, where I feel like I'm going to forget all this. And I need to sort of almost keep track of where my brain's at on a daily basis. But otherwise, no, I don't have a spare thought rolling around my head. Yeah.
There you go. So, okay, so I want to ask you,
Sure.
Isn't necessarily process, but I want to bring up another type of writing that you do. So we've mentioned the novels and the essays and everything, and you're a columnist, of course, but you have done profiles on a lot of really cool, really interesting people. And so I tell the audience, we were kind of joking when we were chatting before the session got started, and I asked Sloan, I was like, do you ever get nervous doing these kind of things anymore? Or is it just old hat to you now because, you've done so many promo things before? And and she said, yeah, some here, some yes, no. And I admitted, I was like, I get nervous. I've done, I don't know how many.
Your job is very much harder. I just have to sort of
think?
sit back and like take cues from you.
Okay, well,
Your job is
yeah,
I know because I've done your job. It's harder.
yeah. So that's what I was gonna say, because I said I get nervous all the time when I'm doing this, when I'm interviewing authors for these types of events. But you have profiled some really big, really cool people. Well, one of the more recent ones that was cool is Stormy Daniels in Playboy.
Yeah.
So let's see who, Dr. Ruth. I'm trying to think of some of the Anya Taylor-Joy. Yeah, you did her for In Style, I think, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the lead actress of Queen's Gambit, you did Bill Hader, Laura Dern, maybe.
Yeah.
So do you get nervous when you're interviewing these big and famous people and writing those kind of pieces? What is that writing process like?
Yeah.
That experience like for you?
This is fun to talk about because I've obviously the book just came out and it's my baby, but also it's like, I suppose anyone who's had a baby is like, I can only look at the baby for so long. Do you know what I mean? Like, look at the baby, you know, it's like kind of nice to like mix it up a little. But yeah, I feel like I don't really get nervous because they're famous. I get nervous because I worry that I will not be able to get them out of the canned answers that they have.
Yeah.
And part of that is, you ask somebody the same questions, that it's not that they're acting, and it's not that they're at the level that these people are at, so hyper concerned with how they're going to come off.
Right.
GQL, Vanity Fair, like these places, I'm sure there is a little bit, but that's probably old hat for them. It's just that, there are only so many ways to answer this question. If you're like, okay, like, how do you feel, Laura Dern, about, strong female roles in Hollywood?
Yeah.
Keanu, you're very enigmatic. Are you still sitting on a bench being sad? I just, Ana Darmus, you sure are Cuban. Let's talk about it. I feel like, how do you get people to really talk about something that they want to talk about in a way that's natural, but at the same time, they're not your best friend. So it's not, and that's sort of disingenuous too. And it's not, I am lucky in the fact that I don't do the kind of profile or have to do the kind of profile, whether it's either inside a magazine or a cover story or whatever it is, where my job and my livelihood depends on me finding out who they're dating or if they're on drugs.
Oh yeah, that
or if
kind
they've
of
like killed a man in Tijuana and just not told anybody about it. My job is not hinge on that. So it's quite a relief. To the point where I will just tell you one quick story. I had an interview who will remain nameless. But I met her. I spent several days with her. I met her daughter, and her daughter really kind of warmed up to me, and we were talking, and her daughter was like 15 and had her like first boyfriend and told me all about him. And she then afterwards was like, oh, so I saw you guys talking, I think she's seeing a boy. And I was like, mm-hmm. And she's like,
tell me,
who is it? And I was like, no, I don't think so. And she's like, are you kidding me? She's like, I'll tell you what, you tell me who my daughter is dating, I'll tell you who I'm dating. And I was like, I don't think so.
I love your journalistic integrity there. You're not going to
I'm not going to sell out like a 14, 15-year-old girl. I'm like, I don't know who you're confusing me with, lady. You seem to be confusing me for someone who does this full time. Like, there are zero consequences for me not finding out that information. So it was actually a lovely, fun moment.
That's
so I enjoy doing it occasionally. Also, as someone who writes primarily narrative nonfiction and who like gets to do interviews like this, it's like, how nice to pop out of yourself and ask other people questions about themselves and not have to insert yourself into it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, so tell me who your dream interview would be.
Oh man. Uh,
You can have more than one. I'll let you have a couple.
I
It's fine.
know,
You do
I
it. Take
know.
it.
I feel like my dream interview, Jane Fonda,
Oh.
or like for an author,
Mhm.
I would love to talk to. See, I'm lucky. I used to work for Random House before I
Yeah.
became a writer full time, and therefore I have been really fortunate in the fact that I've met most of my heroes.
That's
Not many that I haven't met.
yeah.
Doesn't mean that I text them. What are you doing? Do you want to go to the movies, Lilo? Are you bored? You know? But I just so that's actually kind of hard to do. I mean, Cormac McCarthy would be amazing to talk to. I've met Friendly Wit several times. I don't know if she's a huge, I don't know if she likes me. But I think if I was forced to sit down, if I got her to sit down with me, I might be able to sort of like, really pin her down and make her tolerate sort of person who's in her shadow. Um, but yeah, that's hard to say. Or like musician wise, I don't know, they're all dead. Well done. I would have loved to interview Prince. I would have loved to interview
Oh
Bowie.
gosh, yes.
Interview like Bobby Womack. Like they're all dead.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one as you get older. You're like, I don't know who I want to talk to. I think for a younger person, for a musician, I'd be interested in talking to Billie Eilish.
Oh yeah, she's cool.
Yeah.
She's really cool. I
Yeah.
like watching interviews with her, so I would think she'd be a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, audience, I know that a couple of people have hands raised, and I will say I don't have the ability to see raised hands. So it's much easier if y'all would just type your question out, if you can do that, please, and then we'll be happy to answer your specific questions.
I'm not looking. Should I be looking as well? I'm leaving it.
No, don't worry about it. That's my job.
No, don't look in case they ask you something horrible. They're like, you have something in your teeth on purpose. I'm like,
we did have somebody say like they love this stuff on their fridge, and so we might have to let you get
there's so much crap on this fridge. But it is like, in the novel, you were asking how much of me is in the book, and like I don't have a big box of psycho mementos of every movie stub I've ever gone to with every guy who's like lent me his pencil or whatever Lola has in the book. But I think this section of my fridge is probably the closest to like something from a restaurant, a note. My favorite thing on it is there's a cartoon from the New Yorker where one woman says to the other, they run into each other on the street, and one says, I really enjoyed your embarrassing personal essay in the Times. So it's a little bit of everything.
All right, so we've got a question from Stephanie here. She says, Sloan, what's next? Do you have another book of essays in the works? Do you kind of have ideas for essays always stacking up until there's enough for another book? Or do you take a big break for projects like Cult Classic?
I really want the answer would be a lot easier. It would make my life a lot easier if the answer was the former. That I have all these essays, I think, Sedaris does that beautifully, but he's also on contract with the New Yorker, so he can write these pieces at a book length essays within a magazine and then sweep them into a dustpan and make them a bestseller. So good for him. Okay, I love him. He's wonderful, but whatever. But no, so I do tend to sort of vacillate between projects, but this, especially with this next one. So I finished Cult Classic, not finished it. I edited it over the pandemic, but I handed it in March of 2020, right when the pandemic started, which was real crazy.
So it wasn't a pandemic baby then. It was.
No, it's really funny. I remember asking my editor, I was like, do we go put masks on everybody now? Like they did with the lions outside the library, which was so weird. Do we do this or do we let it go, So yeah, no, it was not, I told a friend in an interview the other day, it was a friend talking and we happened to be also printing it. And I was saying that, this is like a last one out, turn off the lights novel. Like I really got in under the wire so that now what is being sort of luckily lauded as New York City nostalgia from this, this time where, I mean, the whole thing is predicated on people running into each other
Yeah.
in
Which I
public,
do. Yeah.
in groups.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, I just didn't know. So the reason why it's so effective is because it comes from an ignorant place. I had no idea. But anyway, so what I do now is, or what I mostly wrote during the pandemic, I was editing this a little bit, but in terms of from scratch writing, is a book about grief, but hopefully funny. Just the way this has a little bit of pathos in it, but it's funny. I think that the grief book is obviously a bit of a bummer, with funny aspects, and not to change gears too sharply, but there's almost no way out of it. It's I was burglarized in late 2019.
Mm.
And it turns out I was sort of being watched. And then a month later, my dearest friend died by suicide. And then the pandemic hit. And so it is this, it's called Grief is for People. Hopefully it will be out towards the end of next year, if not the following. But I mean, it's very, I'm still working on it. It's still being written. So it's weird to talk about it, but it's also, um, it was an interesting choice of how it's like how I spent my summer vacation. Like I chose to take the darkest time in this city and make it worse.
Yep.
But I do have a couple of ideas for essays, but I don't like stockpile them. I really do dramatically shift my attention from fiction to nonfiction.
Got it. Okay, we've got a question from Barbara here. Barbara says, how do you celebrate when your book is published? Do you have any traditions?
Oh, that's such a good question. I take a nap.
Sweet.
I do. No, the second I hand it into my editor, there's always the day where you're going back and forth about edits, and there is a day where you just really eventually are just pressing send on a document that is attached to an email. Yeah. And then I take a nap. Maybe have a cupcake. But no, I think that I need to celebrate more. I think what I don't, I think I should leave the country. I think I should take a vacation. I think that there should be a specific drink or a specific bar that I go to. And I have difficulty not just being worried about what's next. I think it's because I did have a day job for so long, and I feel like it's so ingrained. I mean, to be really frank, I don't come from money, and like the panic about like this not working, the panic about being one of those people that's like, oh great, I published a book, I don't have to do anything else.
Oh yeah.
I have way too much realism about the industry and about also, how much New York City costs, that I think that it can interfere with the celebratory or the relaxation. Yeah, I should really do that. Especially, it's not done yet, but once the grief book is done, I think I've definitely earned
some champagne at least.
Something. Oh, what?
Champagne at least.
Champagne? Oh my gosh. I don't know. I think it's gonna be so strange. What? I have martinis. I've earned martinis.
Mm.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Let me see. Check and see if we have no questions in the Q&A right now. So guys, we'll be talking just for a couple more minutes here. Okay. So if you do have some questions, make sure you get them popped in.
There's so many little chat. This is so nice. This is so nice. Oh, the grief book. Yeah, someone commented.
Yeah, that was me. I sent that to you. So yeah.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, she kind of asked what's next and everything. That's always one of my questions. So you answered that for me. Another question that I always like to ask and have authors kind of speculate on is, if your book were going to be made into a movie, who would you want to play the main characters?
Weirdly, those two questions, what's next and if my book were going to be made to a movie, are very tied together, because I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but it has been optioned for a movie. So I'm writing a script of a cult classic now.
Hey, excellent.
Yeah. I was like, oh.
So are you even allowed to speculate on who you would want to play?
Well, I can guarantee you I will have less than zero input if it gets that far. Who knows? But if it gets that far, I will have less than zero input to who. I don't really have that. I mean, honestly, there's a little bit about her that I think I get like a sort of Emma Stone vibe from her sometimes in her voice. But not really, because I think that you are making something up. And I always describe like holding the characters, I have a visual of them, but in no terms I can really translate. Which makes it sound, I don't know if that sounds pretentious, but I just feel like I can't, it's like I have enough of a visual so that I can write them. I vaguely know what they look like, but there's not a human being on earth that they look like.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard to, and this includes the men, this includes, you know, everybody. So it's hard to know who it would be, but I will say one thing I really like about Lola is that she's 37. She might be 38 in the finished book because I think for fact checking reasons, because of when she was in New York. And so it's really funny. I always joke that I'm like, she grew up from the galley to the but so one thing I like better is that she's had enough of a life where you're not like, you know, she has this very complicated relationship with her boss where it's like, okay, they've had sexual tension. She loves him, she hates him, you know, she's no longer working for him. He knows her the best. He also knows how to push her buttons. But in no way, I don't think, if I've done my job correctly, are you going through this novel being like, is she going to get together with Clive?
Yeah.
Because she's 37, and that's like, it leaves room to have all these different iterations of a friendship or relationship with another person and then make it feel real. And so that is so important to me, her age. So I do know that if and when I'm ever lucky enough that this goes past the script level, which most things do not, if they start throwing around, you know, 30-year-old actresses,
Young ingenues.
Yeah, but also like the thing is, a 37-year-old actress in Hollywood looks 30. It doesn't matter.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah, pluck some talented, beautiful person with no pores. Come on, let's go. Like, yeah.
Well, okay, so you mentioned her boss there, and I just want to tell everybody we have completely glossed over him as a character. We have hardly mentioned him at all. He's a major
focus on the men because it's like that's the experiment. That's what's fun about the book. But yeah, her boss is a big part of this.
He's a major character, but I've not mentioned him much because again, I want to avoid the spoilers. But
about what happens. Yeah, basically he's without spoil. I'll spoil it a tiny.
Okay, I'll let you do it. I'm gonna be responsible.
Yeah. Basically, you know, and I'm sorry we should have done this at the beginning for the folks at home, but she keeps on running to ex-boyfriend night after night after night. I think that we've established, you know, and she does it once she leaves this sort of work reunion dinner. She used to work in a magazine called Modern Psychology. It's the sort of reunion dinner of her old coworkers. And she runs into an ex, and that's fine. That happens. And then it happens again the next night, which is a little weird. And it happens a third time, which again, things are getting, you know, the world is full of coincidences, not that many.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, to put it as simply as possible, that her old boss at the psychology magazine, who has turned into this sort of cult of personality, you know, sort of TV personality figure, kind of guru, has started what is essentially an upscale mind control cult out of an abandoned synagogue on the Lower East Side.
Yes.
That's the spoiler part. It's okay. It's fine. More stuff happens. So it's, you know, I can give you that without giving you everything. But so a lot of it is about his manipulation of her, and whether or not she's sort of feeding into his experiment and their relationship. And she has this sort of resentment at some point that, you know, why didn't they date when there was like tension between them at the office? And why didn't they take advantage of these things? And as she's looking into the past, sort of scanning all over all these exes, she also, you know, runs that scanner over Clive. And again, that's sort of what I mean by like, she's mad at him. She doesn't want him. She's mad that like her life things could have been easier.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that could have been her story.
Yeah.
She's very obsessed with her own narrative and what will be her story.
Yeah.
And that's part of what causes her to look back so much. But I love him as a character because he's totally intolerable. He's larger than life. He's a megalomaniac. and he's really well dressed, and he's just sort of like a funny, ridiculous person, and he was so fun to write.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, he's great.
I can imagine.
He's
All right.
he's the only people always ask like, oh, do you miss anybody from your book? And like weirdly him.
Really?
Well, because like I said, she's sort of this every woman character. I don't have to miss her. I can just live in the world.
Yeah, you live in
You
New
know?
York.
Whereas I feel like Clive feels like someone who I can only take in small doses if he was real,
But you still want to hang out with
to a dinner party. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, question from Selma here. She said, will you include some stops in person or virtual in Canada on your next tour?
In Canada? I don't know. I would love to. I love Toronto. I don't know if you know Sheila Heti's book. She lives up there. She's a friend. Really good natural history museum. So I know there's more than Toronto in Canada. Yeah, I don't know. I think it has to do with like whether or not there's one big event usually.
Yeah.
In these places, these places being outside of America.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not sure if I'm going to London yet. I think so, but it's like, it has to be sort of worth it for a publishing house to send you internationally. And it's harder and harder these days. So we'll see. But I haven't been to Canada in a long time.
The price of airfare. So
yeah, exactly. The airfare, they put you up in the hotel, and I just went on a book tour in 10 different cities in this country, and that's sort of expensive enough,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we're about to wrap things up here, and I want to read Angel's comment because I think it's great.
Sure.
She said, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say that this has been fun. I've been in a reading slump, but hearing about the story and the genres it encompasses has sparked my interest again. Soon to be moved forward off the TBR list, the to be read list. So
nice.
Gotten Angel out of her slump. That's awesome.
Listen, I live to get Angel out of her slump. That's seriously, that is really
Angel, I agree with you. Move it up. I don't want to call it a beach read because it's not what you think of when you think of the beach read genre. But at the same time, like I said, I breezed through it pretty quickly because it absolutely is a page turner. And I just got so invested in the characters and trying to figure out what the heck was going on.
I know. Well, good.
What's real, what's not. How's it going to end? Which, like I said, it was a complete twist. And so in a lot of ways, it is kind of one of those good kind of summer reads. You can do it quickly. You're going to keep blasting through it, and you're going to be surprised at the end of it. So Angel, I would say, yes, definitely go get a copy of it. It will get you out of your slump for sure, because it's just a great read overall. I do, again, just want to thank you so much for being with us this evening. I wish it could have been in person again. That would have been fun.
Also, the previous question, just so she knows, so that, just I'm individually selling it to people based on personal connections. I am a quarter Canadian. So that's good to know.
There you go.
It's not in the bio. I leave it out of the bio, but it's true. But anyway, no, but I happy to get people out of their slump or get people to re-up. It's like the nicest, the highest compliment. So I hope, I hope it's just sort of a smart beach read. Yeah, that would not be bad.
And again, and to part of your previous question too about touring and all of that, and saying I wish I could have you here. I do have to tell everybody, keep your eyes peeled for further announcements from Six Bridges Book Festival about upcoming events. As we pivoted everything during the pandemic and took the fest completely online, it's been wonderful because it does allow us to have great conversations like this throughout the year with some really amazing authors who we might not otherwise be able to get to Little Rock, or who might not be able to make it the one weekend the year we have the fest. And so please make sure to everyone out there that you are following CALS and seeing all these amazing virtual events that they are bringing to a very wide audience. Also, though, make sure y'all pay attention to the schedule when it's published for the upcoming fest. It's going to be live and in person again. It's going to be a mix of virtual events and live events. I don't think we'll ever do away with virtual events again, because it has allowed us to bring some really cool authors to a wide audience, but there will be some in-person stuff. And so, like I said, you might not be able to be here this time, but keep working on that next book. Keep working on all these amazing things that you write, and hopefully we can have you back again sometime in the future. But I cannot thank you enough for being here with us this
Oh
evening.
no, you were
Fun
wonderful
chat.
questions. And also, hey, I'm one of the people who actually has been to Little Rock and would come again. So,
Great. So thanks again for coming, Sloan. Want to thank Six Bridges Book
thank you
Festival
all
and
for coming.
thank our audience for participating. We really appreciate y'all supporting everything that we do. So have a great night, everyone.
This was excellent. Thank you all. Bye.